Hello. Hello there. Hi. Nice to see you. Just thought I'd hello, Christine. How you going? Hi, Kathy. Nice to see you. Hi, Rosalie. Nice to see you too. Um, thank you all for joining me. Obviously, I'm in Australia at the moment, in Brisbane, Australia. So I think it's about 8:30 p.m. here. So I'm not sure where everyone's from. So you're probably different time zones to me. Good morning, Christina. Where are you from, Christina? I'm assuming America. Am I right? America or Canada? Yeah. So it's evening here. Um, Thank you so much for joining. I thought I'd have like a bit of a conversation today about a few different things. Hi, Diane. It's good to see you coming in. Oh, Michigan. Excellent. Nice. Nice. I've heard nice things about Michigan. Very key swing state as well. So it's very important for the Democrats to win you over. I'm sure you probably voted for Democrats at the last election. But yeah, it's obviously it's a very important state over there. Speaking of people in states, obviously Donald Trump at the moment. I just thought I wanted to chat about a few things. One of the things I want to chat about later, obviously being from Australia, we were blue for years, and yeah, okay. Good morning, Diane. How are you? Morning, Kathy. Thanks for coming in. Oh, really? So, yeah, I do know that Michigan was quite blue for a long time, and I think they like. Thank you for the love hearts. The love hearts make me feel good. I don't actually even know how you do that, but they are fantastic. um, yeah, I do know that a lot of the Rust Belt states were originally, well, not so much Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, but more so the other ones. Hi, Mary. Thanks for joining. Were actually sort of more towards, hi, Alvin, Judy, were more sort of democratic at the time and sort of became more working class with Trump. I can sort of see how Trump sort of picked up a lot of those sort of, hi, Stuart, thanks for joining, working class areas in that area. I think a lot of it had to do with Trump being considered like the outsider and, obviously lying to people and saying that he was going to bring back all those manufacturing jobs back from China. And I think the Democrats always seem to get stuck, especially with Trump. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining. They always seem to get stuck as the establishment party, as the insider party, Um, and I think that's a big thing for the Democrats to overcome at the next election, or even at the midterms. Because even if Trump doesn't run at the next, we build trucks, Chevrolet Fords. Oh, excellent. Yeah, I've heard yeah, okay. Yeah, the big trucks. I'm guessing that a lot of those manufacturing jobs in the sort of Rust Belt states, one of the biggest lies that Trump says, and when people say this, thanks for the love hearts. I'm not sure. um, you know, I think a lot of the thank you. A lot of that the jobs. It's not so much that they're going to like China. It's more so that although I'm sure a lot of them have gone to China, it's more that robotics has also. I've seen some of these factories and warehouses even in Australia, and the problem isn't so much they're not going to come back to America. A lot of those jobs are just going to be replaced by robotics. So again, it's another big lie that Trump says that all these jobs are going to come suddenly back to America. In Australia, as most of you know, I'm Australian. We got hit with big tariffs with Donald Trump, 10%, which is the baseline, which wasn't too bad. It's actually one of the better ones. But what they really got us is on medicine. So we export a lot of medicine, that sort of thing, and that's going to make it a lot more expensive for us in those terms. So we're not really happy with Trump at the moment. Not that we're that happy with Trump before as well. But I've got to say, Trump firing the statistician was like one of the crazier things that I've seen Trump do. He's done some pretty crazy things. Um, that was just insane. Like watching it, like the idea, like I don't even know, even how he's not embarrassed about doing that. That's the crazy. It's horrible here. It's terrible. Trump has destroyed us. He has gutted out our institutions and businesses and education and medicine and research. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at all that stuff with Christina. I was looking at all the stuff with Doge and a lot of the stuff that sort of they gutted everything out, sort of research, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's incredible. He's turning America into like a stupid country, and I know America isn't a stupid country. Look, I know about 30. I know about oh my god, yeah, I know about 30% of Americans voted for Trump, but that's eligible voters, sorry, voted for Trump. But that's not the majority of Americans. And even though I criticize Trump a lot and I write articles about him and criticize him, stuff like that, I hope it never comes across that I'm criticizing the people, or at least the people, the sort of Trump, the people who didn't vote for Trump. But I'm not. I don't even like necessarily like hate the people who were like swing voters or independents and things like that, who are now sort of having buyer's remorse about voting for him. He's a nutcase. That man has no shame. Yeah, I Mary. Yeah, yeah. He doesn't have any shame at all, and he doesn't respect his base at all as well. That's one of the things I've noticed so much. He actually hates his base. Like, it's incredible. Like, I don't think there's been a political part. Like, a lot of times, because I go on Twitter a bit, and I'll hear the sort of MAGA base say things like, "Oh, liberals hate us," and all this sort of stuff. After they've like called you like 1,000 names, and and basically, I think no, no. If you think liberals hate you, it's nothing in comparison to how much your dear leader hates you. I mean, he lies to them 100 times a day. He tells them really obvious lies, and the only reason he thinks he can do that, and he hates America, he hates democracy, yeah. But I also think, Christina, he hates his base. Um, can you imagine Trump, like this New York socialite, right, who grew up in New York? I despise those who didn't bother to vote. The US can truly suck it up. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people, I think, who didn't either vote or voted for him, but they never considered him like sort of like full on MAGA. Um, if you look at statistics, a lot of those, a lot of oh hi Nick, thanks for joining. A lot of those people who sort of voted for him and things like that, like who weren't massive MAGA, they weren't really paying attention. One of the interesting things that the polling showed afterwards, because a lot of times the best polling, they still love hearts. Sometimes the best polling can be after the election. We're talking like, a couple of months later. And what it showed, which didn't really surprise me at all, is that the people who voted for Trump the most were the least informed. And the people who were most informed about like politics and news voted for Kamala Harris. So that doesn't really surprise. There are legit researchers showing fraud. Yeah, yeah. I don't know about the fraud. I don't know about the fraud, but I do know that I do know. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for joining. I do know that there are. Yeah, I think a lot of people weren't paying attention to politics, and this is a big problem. And it's no longer about they all watch propaganda channels. Yeah, everyone's divided in ignorant trades. Yeah. Um, they are. No, they look. There are a lot. Look, I don't mean, and I know this is a safe space, so we can talk like this. I wouldn't necessarily say this like outside of this safe space because I trust you people. Right? But like, I think there's never been a political party in America that kind of made sort of assholes and make them feel like they're at home, like a political party. So because the old like Fox and Newsmax, so that search for independent news, yeah. Well, the funny thing is, if you speak to MAGA, they do think that they are always watching independent news. Like, they think Fox News, they think Newsmax is all independent news, right? They will follow someone on Twitter because a lot of them, what they do, especially the ones under 50, right, is they actually don't follow. Hi, Christian. How you going? Hi, Patricia. A lot of the people on who are under like 50 and they don't really follow, because Fox News audience is generally above the age of 75, right? and Newsmax and all that. So you have them all sort of the older part of the Trump movement. The younger part are very online, and I mean very online. I'm from New York. I've always known Trump from way back in the 80s. I knew he was um, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he was always like a socialite and stuff like that. But a lot of the MAGA people who watch it, they actually think that the news that they follow is independent, right? And they actually think that they will often call, right? They'll often call liberals sheep, right? They'll often go, because I'm on Twitter, they'll go, oh, you're a sheep. Where did you hear that? CNN? Did you hear that from MSNBC? Like that, they just regurgitate the same lines. And it's like that with the slightest bit, they don't have any irony or any self awareness that they're all repeating the same lines of, sorry, just woke up a few minutes ago having coffee. Thanks, Linda. MAGA, and it's weird because they didn't pay attention to politics. They don't even know what the difference is between. Yeah, they're not. Look, MAGA aren't. Look, obviously, the biggest demographic of MAGA is people who don't have a massive amount of education. That's just the truth. And I don't say this as because there are people who are not educated who are not stupid. Not education isn't everything, right? It's just a certain amount of. I think. I think it's not just that they're not educated. I also think it's that a little bit is that they're just not. You repeat one line as MAGA, MAGA. Yeah, repeat. Yeah, they constantly do repeat the same lines over and over again. Hi, good morning, Car. Hi, Diane. Regurgitation person hasn't thought about what it means. Yeah, they often, because when I go on Twitter, they often go, "Oh, where did you hear that? MSNBC." They just repeat those lines. You're a sheep, and they put the little sheep emojis on there. And I'm like, the first thing I say is, "Oh, where do you get your news from?" And what happens when you say that back to them is they now become a little bit self-aware because when you say to them, where do you get news from? Now they have to give you a name, right? And if they say Fox News, right, obviously that's not independent. Newsmax isn't independent. And if they talk about their favorite Twitter, because a lot of them just follow someone on Twitter, like an influencer, right, who's got like millions of views, right? And if you say that person, I'll go like, wait a sec, that's that's one of Donald Trump's best friends. So where do you get your news from? Because you said I get my news from CNN and MSNBC. I actually don't even watch CNN or MSNBC. I'm not big into cable television. But thanks for the love hearts. Thank you for the love hearts. Hi David, thanks for joining. Thanks Diane. And yeah, but it's just it's incredible how they can just like without any self awareness, and it's like we know what he was from the casinos, disasters, to very crazy tabloids. He's not an intelligent person. He's not. Yeah, he's basically. I think he like in America. I said this because a lot of people probably watched it. I recently influencer an influencer they elect. That's right, but they do. But Christine, they actually do. They will follow an influencer, and that influencer will be one of Donald. Like everything they post is like basically like Trump's their D leader, right? It's just beautiful. I love it because it's quite funny too. Because these influencers will post something like Donald Trump playing golf, right? They'll have a picture of Donald Trump playing golf, and the caption that they put in there is "The man never stops," right? You should watch Watch the Diamonds. They're great. Yeah, I've seen some Rachel Maddow. I do like Rachel Maddow. Yeah, I do like her. Yeah. And so they just go like so. There's a picture of him playing golf, and they're like, the man never stops. Like he's just constantly working. Like he's playing golf. And it's just like full on propaganda. And a lot of the people who follow, who call like liberals sheep and all that, they just see the dollars, but they don't see the real truth. Yeah. In fact, a lot of these influencers, I don't know if many of you know them, people like Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, all these people on Twitter, they're actually on YouTube and Twitter. They actually recently got caught a couple of months ago with a Russian organization that was tied to the government was giving these people hundreds of thousands of dollars. In fact, in some of it, millions of dollars. And it was they were all like MAGA influencers online, right? Now there's no we we don't have any evidence that the influencers were told by these people to write certain stories. But what I think what happened is they already knew that these people were writing a lot of Ukraine stuff. He never stops being a fucking idiot, narcissistic, social. Yeah. It's incredible. But these people, they just basically were taking all this money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all these YouTubers and stuff like that. Friends of Donald Trump, right? Thanks to the love hearts, and they were taking and that was from Russia, from a Russian government. And so even if these people didn't, they weren't giving instruction, they were given the money because they were already saying anti-Ukrainian stuff, right? And that's what it was all about. They wanted to, and what Tim Pool, who's one of these people who's a friends with Joe Rogan, all that, he famously said something like, after he was, now we know he'd been paid. He said that I couldn't believe this, that Vladimir Zelensky should give Putin an apology. Like, that's what so this is how crazy these people are. And now that, Trump has kind of like gone after Putin a little bit, at least publicly, they're now sort of, they're finding it hard to defend him and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I've heard of Tim Pool. I got to go find him. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's laughable. Yeah. I know they were getting hundreds of thousands, and look, they don't deny it. They admit it, because what happened is the actual FBI came and saw them, right? And they all publicly agreed. They accepted the fact that they were given money by this Russian organization, but their defense is that they weren't never given instructions on what to say. But you don't have to be giving instructions, because this is the interesting thing, right? They were giving millions of dollars by a middle person. This person didn't say they were Russian, right? But they knew that they had contacts with Russia, right? And they were accepting the money. But usually on YouTube, if you get money, it's for advertising, right? Or it's for exclusive content. So you say to someone, I'll take I have so much respect for Zelensky. Yeah, so do I. Do you remember? And they said that, yeah, we did take the money. There was this is the really weird part. This Russian place, they never asked them to advertise anything, right? They never asked them to make exclusive content for their promotions, right? They just said, here's the money, and you just keep doing what you're doing. They didn't even put metrics on how many people had to watch the videos. Some of the videos that these people were getting paid for had as low views as like 400 or 500 people. Yeah. Linda, he was taught by Roy Cohn. Yeah, Roy Cohn. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing in Linda is, I always find it interesting how few people, and his father, Fred, how few people know about Roy Cohn. Like what I mean by few people, I mean like MAGA. Because if you know the story between him and his mentor, Roy Cohn, you know that basically Roy Cohn told him never admit defeat, right? He said deny, 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 right? So when you see him deny the election results in 2020, right? Then you see, and he says, what, it was stolen, whatever. Then when you know his relationship to Roy Cohn, and you know what Roy Cohn taught him, which was never accept defeat, right? Then it's not a surprise that he didn't accept the election result. I mean, this is how crazy Trump was with the election results. In 2016, Trump beat Hillary Clinton, right? But she won the popular vote. But he said, I mean, this is how much of a bad loser he is. He won the election, right? So he should be happy. He should be like, oh, okay, I won the election, right? But he couldn't accept the fact that she won the popular vote. So he made up a story that the election was rigged for the popular vote. Now, this is so stupid, right? Like, if you're going to rig an election, why would you rig it for the popular vote and not for the electoral college vote, which is the bit that actually gets you to win, especially when it all appears on the same ballot? It's all on the same ballot. There's not a separate ballot for the popular vote and another ballot for the electoral college. So it doesn't even make any sense. But this is the fact that Trump can say these ridiculous things about, like, he won the popular vote with Hillary Clinton, right? And not give any evidence at all. Just shows it's all about him. Yeah. Just shows he couldn't even accept a win, right? When he won, he couldn't even accept he won, and still he still does it, and he's so threatened by Obama. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He was. I think he's always liked. He's kind of always, I think, liked Obama. I'll be honest. I actually think he likes Obama. I think he likes him, and at the same time, I think he hates him because he could never be Obama. And I remember years and years ago. Hi, Deborah. Thanks for joining. I don't know if you ever saw they did that the dinner, the press dinner, um, and basically all about manipulation. Yeah, that's right, Nick. And basically, he lies as he breathes. Yeah, he does. He just lies all the time. And yeah, but when you lie, thanks for that, love hearts. Thank you. When you lie all the time, it's easier to get away with things, right? I mean, Donald Trump has basically proven, right? And it's actually a sad thing for America, I think, because it's changed, I feel, the culture in America. I feel like you can now, hi, Shelley, thanks for joining. I feel like now in America, you can get away with a lot more since Trump. He's kind of normalized lying. And what he's also normalized, thanks for the love hearts, he's also, what I think he's done is that he's normalized. Um, he knows now that if you lie all the time, people can't keep up with the lies. And if you can't keep up with the lies, you can get away with it, right? And if a Democrat lies once every 6 months, right, they're like, oh my God, you're a liar. But if Trump lies like once, like 100 times a day, because you're so used to it, it's almost like he's been immune, like some sort of vaccine it has. He gave permission to be a giant dick. Yeah. I mean, and you know what the interesting thing is that he 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 lies so much and he does so many asshole things that when he does something that seems normal, he gets praise for it. It's not like he gets a lot of praise. I'll give you an example. When Joe Biden, thank you so much for the love hearts who are that. Um, when Joe Biden, we found out that Joe Biden actually had cancer. Trump sent out this message, right? And it was like a standard message that anybody would write, any Democrat would write, and most Republicans would write. Like, you know, Melania and I would like to give our sympathies to the Biden family. It was just normal like that. Now, anybody who reads his post like I do, there's no way he wrote that because even the punctuation and the grammar was not even like him, right? So he's obviously given that to someone to write, right? But it was just a stock standard one. Yeah, he didn't write it. Yeah, but even if he didn't write it, and he said to someone, right, can you post that on my behalf, right? Like a social media, whatever it is, right? But, which is unusual because you can tell he usually writes his own stuff. But let's just say he did that, right? Um, the other thing is the way the media reacted to that was so alarming to me. It basically illuminated what Trump is done to the American society, right? They praised him, and it wasn't just Fox News that praised him. CNN said we should acknowledge. I can't believe you read his trash. Oh my god! Yeah, yeah, yes. The we should CNN said we should acknowledge what a nice message Trump said about Joe Biden. Right now, then MSNBC said the same thing. They were like, "Oh, look, we look, that was a really nice message." Whatever. And Fox News and Newsmax, they're just running the story 24/7. Now, think about what we're listening to. Think about what's happening here. If someone in politics, like let's say Mitt Romney, we found out Mitt Romney had cancer, right? And then all the Democrats, we know that 100% of the Democrats would send a similar message, condolences, but nobody would comment on it. Nobody. Not left-wing media, not independent media, not right wing. You wouldn't. Why? Because it's expected of them, right? It's like what normal people do, right? So you wouldn't get he's incapable of having any kind of empathy because he only cares about himself. Yeah, exactly. And watching that process of all media basically just praising him for doing something that everyone else would do. Basically, I realized that not only does he get away with get all these lying and doing that, it actually helps him because when he does do something like half normal, he gets praise for it. when other people wouldn't get praise for it because they'd just be expected of it. So it's almost like I always think of it as like the good when you have children, you got one good kid and one kid that plays up all the time, and the parents always it's the crazy and it's the bad kid, the bad kid who's always doing bad things does one good thing. It's like, oh my god, let's get him a brand new PlayStation, and the good kid who's always doing stuff all the time, he never gets praise because he's always doing good things. I feel like Trump has psychologically got into the American society, not us, but a lot of people, including news as well. And he's managed, he's managed to manipulate American society. He's managed to manipulate the news. And when I say the news, I even mean people like MSNBC, CNN, because he can just do something normal and then suddenly it's all like, praise, praise, praise. And this is always going to be hard for the Democrats because the Democrats, they don't get the same. But he's not a kid. He's a petty. Yeah. Well, basically, he acts like a toddler, right? He just acts like an adult toddler, right? And he does get away with it a lot. And I think one of the reasons that not so much, and probably not MSNBC as much, although I did hear them praise him on that condolence thing to them. But that was the only thing. But CNN were pretty big on, we've got to acknowledge what he just wrote. Why? If you're not going to acknowledge anybody else for doing it, why would you acknowledge Trump, right? Why are you giving him special treatment for for posting something that everyone else wrote? When everyone else wrote that same similar post, no one else came out and said we should acknowledge those people, right? And again, I think this is kind of the Donald Trump reality TV star guy, where he knows the characters in reality TV, right? You have like characters, and sometimes people are attracted to the bad person, and because it's more interesting, because the bad person always does, it's more fun to watch the bad person all the time. And that's also an advantage to Trump because in this day and age where a lot of people don't pay attention to media, right? They're not paying attention to what's going on. He's a product of his father. New Yorkers who know him well is racist and is unintelligent. The only thing he knows is how to screw it. Yeah, yeah. I think he does. But he knows how to manipulate. He does know how to manipulate some people, right? And if you think about all those Republicans that he made fun of during the 2016 primaries, like little Marco Rubio. He made fun of Ted Cruz's wife. He called his wife ugly. And now he's some of his biggest supporters, right? So he does know how to sort of manipulate people. I think that comes from growing up with, like being mentored by someone like Roy Cohn, that sort of thing. I think behind the scenes, he does know that very well. That's the only gift he has. Yeah. The other gift he has, which is really important these days, and I do think this, I think had Trump come into being a president earlier than he did, it would have been harder for him because in 2016, I think a lot of people were looking for an anti-establishment candidate, and Hillary Clinton came across as an establishment candidate, and he came across as an outsider, right? And I think he came around at the right time. Hi, Christina. I meet people all the time who act like him, maybe not 100, but they see it. It's flawed. Do not think it's okay to proud chest. It has integrated. Yeah, yeah. And it calls them out, holds someone accountable. They are. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for joining. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's shocking. But the thing about it, like why I think he won last year, right, is because he came around the second time. He went for it. Was the landscape was good for Trump, right? You had basically 2024, a lot of countries around the world. So if you look at it outside of America, because what I notice as an Australian who follows politics in America and Europe and everything is that Western countries, there's a massive trend between what happens in one Western country and another one, right? So, you know, so it was a perfect storm, Christina. And what you basically saw is you saw Western leaders all around the world get kicked out in record numbers, like no other year ever in the record in modern times, right? And it was because of post-COVID inflation. So what they were doing is, if you were in power after COVID, you got blamed for the inflation, right? Whether you were left wing, right wing, or whatever, centrist, whatever it was, and that was happening all around Europe and everywhere. And I think Mexico was the only country it didn't happen in. So Kamala had to fight against that, right? And the other thing that was happening with that was during COVID, is that people got used to going online a lot more than they did before COVID, and that continued on after COVID. Kind of, when it not went away, but it changed, and everything sort of opened up, and people got used to being online all the time, and they also got used to things like new things were introduced, like TikTok became big, right? There was more streaming services. So now you have so many extra things to distract you that you never had before, right? Or you had them before, but it just increased after COVID. And so now, not everyone was following the news like they used to before. Now there's a whole bunch of people. Hi, Richard. There's a whole bunch of people now who are not following the news like they used to, right? And they're just watching TikTok, and when they're watching TikTok, they're not watching politics. They're just watching comedy or their favorite influencer or whatever, streaming services. They're just watching that. And so they're tuned out from politics. And this is true all around the world in Western countries, and they tuned out at record rates, right? So now you have now because of that, we are from Chicago, have family and friends in business. Yeah. Yeah. And because of that, um, because people weren't tuning in, it was much harder for politicians to get eyeballs and attention, right? Because people are just not paying attention to normal, like CNN, Fox News, and things like that, right? So one thing that Trump is really good at, right, is getting eyeballs, and that's because he's controversial, right? And controversy gets eyeballs, right? And he says stupid stuff all the time, but that stupid stuff also gets attention on him. Um, Linda, with the Epstein story, I'm not surprised, because growing up in New York, it was no secret. If you watch the Howard Stern show, the creepy, like he said, if it wasn't his daughter, he would date her. Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's the whole Epstein thing is just insane. Yeah, but yeah, and I'll actually talk a little bit about the Epstein thing as well, because I think it's quite interesting. Sorry, they had to go to New York. Yeah. Um, but I think that's the thing with Trump, is that in an era where getting eyeballs or getting attention is such an important thing in politics, he can do that. He can do that better than Kamala, because Kamala Harris came across as quite she was very good, but she was also very normal. Do you know what I mean? Which is not a bad thing, but it's harder to get attention when you're not saying crazy shit all the time, right? So it worked in Trump's favor. Also, a lot of people, I noticed, Dr. Hogan, I enjoyed the hell out of your wonderful dissection of politics and people. um, yeah, and I just think that it was interesting um, how how a lot of people in 2024. I was watching him, right? I was watching him going to court every day. Remember, he had all those indictments against him, and he was showing up in court, and he had the Jack Smith his gift are the 3-word slogans. Yeah, yeah. And by the way, 3-word slogans are really good when people aren't paying attention, right? Build a wall, right? Immigration, like stuff like that, like if you have to, he has 2 PhDs and MD, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think he got away with a lot of this stuff because people were not paying attention, and I think a lot of people on the left were starting to realize that they were thinking, and if I was in America, I would have been thinking the same thing. You were thinking, why was the polling numbers so close? That was the thing I was noticing. That it didn't matter what crazy stuff he said. It didn't matter how many indictments he had against him, right? Yeah, it was like to be, yeah, yes, he likes to be controversial. Yeah, it didn't matter what happened. He was showing up in court. There was a period where he kept showing up in court, right? And the polling after that showed a slight increase. That's when I knew, that's in my head when I thought, wait a second, he could win this because people were not paying attention. And I think in America, a lot of people, we think many people didn't vote and that's why he won. Yeah. I think it's people didn't vote, but I also think it's he got the working class people in the swing states, right? A lot of them swung towards him, and he got young people, right? Especially young men. And I can totally understand why he got young men. That's no secret. He was going on all those podcasts where young men listen. Young men are not listening to CNN. They're watching Joe Rogan and all the orbiters that are around Joe Rogan, all these podcasters, right? That's what they listen to, and they were sympathetic towards Donald Trump. Donald Trump went on all their podcasts, not just Joe Rogan, but all these other ones as well. And their audiences are just young guys, right? And I do think that if there's one thing that Democrats need to do better at the next election is they need to talking about Hogan, guys, just in case you missed it, sorry, I was cross um, but yeah, it was basically I was thinking that the Democrats need to do better to get young men in, right? Apologies, so fish text anyway. But yeah, so I think basically we can do better to get young men to come back because when you look online, right, there's not a lot. A lot of the stuff that appeals that says to young men, come and join me, comes from the right. There's not a lot on the left, right? Hi Jan, hi Maura. There's not a lot on the left that's appealing to young guys. Joe, I'm trying to publish the jurisprudence of refusal, and it will appear that the algorithm is preventing me to publish a world form and said essay. Richard, oh, really? Is that right, Richard? I'm trying to publish and it will appear that the algorithm. Okay. Um, yeah, yeah. They do need better messaging. They do need better messaging um, on 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 getting young men back, and they need better messaging on getting working class people back. Right, um, and they could have. And I believe, right, at the next election, I don't think Trump's going to be there, but it will probably be a Trump, like someone that Trump endorses. Right, so it'll be basically Trump probably running as a de facto with this person. Um, but I definitely do think that that the Democrats need to do better with working class people and young men. And I'm already seeing a difference. I'm seeing people like Pete Buttigieg going on all these podcasts in the right wing, not right, I wouldn't say right wing, but people who are sympathetic, right, to Donald Trump. They're people around, these people have millions and millions of followers, right? And a lot of these followers are working class people and they're young people, right? And Pete Buttigieg goes on those shows and he does amazing, right? Because he's authentic. And being authentic these days is one of the biggest selling points you can have, right? Um, Ironically, I think Barack Obama wouldn't do that well now because he's too polished. What works these days, I believe, in the media is because is more authentic. You sound normal. You're maybe not that polished. All that sort of stuff. So I think Pete Buttigieg, even though he is quite polished in some ways and stuff like that. He can talk to anybody. He also comes from that area, like he comes from the Midwest, so he can talk to people like that. He grew up, right, as he says all the time. He's surrounded. He's surrounded by a lot of people who are sort of conservative. So he's used to being around those people. And I think that's what the Democrats need to do to get more people in to vote for him is to sort of appeal to more working class people and that sort of thing. Uh, Also have more sort of, stay away. That sounds good. Refusal the gift that Trump has is his showmanship. Yeah, he is. He's a showman, and look, he's probably entertaining. When I hear him at a rally and he's talking about the penis size of some golfer or something like that, a lot of people would think, "Oh, that my God, what an idiot!" or that. But young men would probably look at that and laugh, right? It's just probably true, right? They probably working class people look at that and think, "Oh, he's like he doesn't take it," So, you know, when I think you got to choose, you know, your when you criticize someone like that, you got to choose that you don't alienate, right? All these other groups that are going with him, and that includes young men and stuff like that. And it doesn't mean that you pander to young men who are like misogynist or rape or that sort of stuff. But you can give them a place, proud of them standing up with Dems. Yeah, I think it's good for the Democrats to not just because the Democrats he's so insecure. The Democrats have such a good story to tell, right? And a good story to tell for young people, right? And a good story to tell for working class people, right? But they found it hard to get that across in 2024, right? But I think at the midterms, they have a really good story to tell, right? And I think they need to go in with a big policy that's going to bring those groups back. And I think a housing policy, I've said this 100 times before, but a housing policy, I think, is a really good policy to bring these people back. Building homes, young people, right? You know, young people need more homes. Rents are going up, home prices are going up, all that sort of stuff. So I think it'd be good to have a policy that sort of brings in all these groups who build homes. A lot of plumbers, electricians, they get involved in that sort of stuff. So that also brings working class people in as well. Again, they need a better messaging. They just need to go in all states. Yeah, you can't, you can't. And I think the other thing is it didn't help that when Donald Trump, right? I think a lot of we are firing every single one of them mass recall here. I think what we need to do, not me, but like the Democrats need to do, is to sort of appeal to all different groups of people. That means not just go on CNN, MSNBC. They need to go. They need to go on all these different podcasts. They need to go on TikTok and all that stuff. And I think to some people in the Democratic Party, they're like, we shouldn't, that's kind of, that's a little bit beneath us, or, why are you pandering to these people? But you have to go to where people are, right? And if people aren't in one area, and you can't just win with one certain group of people. How do you see Mandami? I like Mandami. Yeah, I like Mandami. I don't know if I agree with all his policies, but I like how he talks about cost of living, right? I think Mandami is a perfect example of what Democrats need to do. And the way that he was bashed, right? The way that he was bashed by the sort of more centrist Democrats just shows that they're not really understanding what the problem is, right? It illuminated to me because you don't have to agree with his policies, right? You could say, okay, I like this policy, but this policy I don't like. They could have said that, right? But instead they said, oh, he's a communist, he's like this. They really went hard against him, right? And I think that to me illuminated the fact that the Democratic Party, Joe, this is a substance that Trump will direct the collapse of Substack, MAGA as a cult, has begun its resistance against authors, posts, social media, joined. Yeah. Problem with Democrats is they take the high ground. Yeah. Yeah. Look, Democrats do always try to fight fair, and Republicans always don't play by the rules. And that's always going to be work against you, right? But it can also work in your favor to some degree. It depends on how far you take it, right? Because I think I agree that like if you look at the 2024 election, right? I think what we realized is that people looked past what Trump was doing, right? And voted for him anyway because they thought, I'm not talking about the MAGA base, I'm talking about more independents and swing voters, and they went, he's better for the economy, right? It's because he makes up stuff. He lies about, he blamed everything on Biden, and, and people have short memories. They forgot what it was like beforehand. And so they believe his lies, right? So a lot of people who voted for him, who weren't MAGA, just voted on the economy. And a lot of them said, I don't really like him as a person. So I think at the end of the day is that the Democrats, they thought he was kidding. Yeah. I don't know. I think a lot of people will overlook things about a leader, right? If they think it's going to be better for them economically, right? If you have someone who's suffering through inflation, like if you look at Mandami, so Mandami is a good example. Mandami was going out on TikTok into New York, and he purposely, he did this on purpose. He went into areas that had voted for Donald Trump, right? And he interviewed people. This is my favorite TikTok videos. I kept saying, believe what I said. Yeah, my favorite TikTok videos of Mandami is him talking to MAGA supporters. I think it's really, I think it's brilliant. I think it's really smart, and it's a really good way to win elections because of this, right? Because what you do is when you go to the opposition, right, is you're saying that I don't hate you all, right? So that's again, you're not sort of saying I hate all these people, right? And at the same time, he's saying to them, "Why did you vote for Trump?" And he's being nice about it, right? He's just having a conversation, and pretty much all of them said, "Well, my rent prices were going up, grocery prices were going up. Hi, Manny, nice to see you, Manny. Thanks for joining, Manny. And rent prices are going up. All this stuff is happening, right? And that was basically it. Very few people, right? Very few people who actually talked to Mandami, who voted for Trump, said to him, "I voted for Trump because I liked him as a person." Right? It was overwhelmingly on economic issues. All the exit polls and everything showed that it showed that that people voted on economics number one. And now people lie and think it's okay, whatever, we look good for them, put down as makes you look bad so they can look good. And this is yeah. I think I think what it also tells the Democrats, though, Christina, said it like he's a nut. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like they didn't vote for him, so the people who were talking to Mandami were not saying we think Trump is a great guy or anything. Good morning, Joe from Charleston. Hi, Marty. Hi, Marty. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks. And basically, when you look at him, they weren't saying like that was the interesting thing, right? The amount of people who voted for him, who weren't, weren't looking at his, all the stuff we said, oh, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, all that nutty stuff, right? They weren't paying attention to that. They were just living their lives, and they weren't watching news, and they just basically they thought this guy's talking about the economy more, right? And the Democrats are talking about Trump being an authoritarian, right? So if you think about it this way, right? If you're someone in New York and you're not paying attention to politics, but you're getting a little bit on the peripherals, right? Everyone's going to get a little bit of politics, right? A little bit, even if you don't pay attention, right? Even if you're on TikTok, occasionally they'll send you like a video, even if you don't like following videos, right? So you'll get a little bit, right? So they wouldn't have seen Trump showing up in court, none of that stuff, right? But they would be suffering through like cost of living prices, all that, and they're seeing Trump lying. We know he's lying, but he's still saying it. He's saying, I'm going to bring down prices from day one, right? I'm going to end the wars from day one, right? They get their news from clickbait on. So yeah, exactly. And it's an algorithm, right? So and by the way, Linda, a lot of these people, they're not even following news. They're just watching dancing videos or comedy videos on TikTok. I know so many people on TikTok who don't watch news at all on there. Now I say, do you know he's a convicted rapist and he's been found guilty of it? Yeah. And they say, really? Yeah, exactly. Christina, that's exactly right. A lot of people don't even know that stuff about him. And here's the other thing, right? If you do say to someone, did you know Trump was, this and that? You know what they say? They'll say, yeah, but so was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, people made accusations against Bill Clinton, right? Or for example, do you remember the documents case where Donald Trump took those documents, right? That he wasn't supposed to take. And then we found out later that Joe Biden also took the documents, right? Now, if you have a big population of Americans who are not following politics except on the peripherals, right? They're not hearing the details of that. The details, obviously, we know here is that Trump took them and then tried to obstruct it, right? Right? He took the documents and obstructed. Joe Biden took it, but he handed them back. But people aren't listening to the details, right? Yeah, so did my points. Yeah, exactly. So people aren't listening to the details. Everything is being muddled, right? It's being muddled. All they're hearing is Joe took documents, Trump took documents. They're both as bad as each other. Trump has been accused of stuff. Well, so was Bill Clinton, right? So, do you remember the 2016 debate with Hillary, and Trump brought all these women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual, so again, it's all muddled. They're not looking at they're not going to be going through the details. Oh, Biden, Biden took the documents back, but but Trump didn't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the problem with that, Christine, is they're not thinking, they're just thinking they're both the same. They're not looking at, they're just seeing this, they're seeing the surface level, right? Because they're not that engaged. Yeah. And so, a lot of people were like, they're both as bad as each other, right? And that's the thing, right? And then when Joe Biden lost, sorry, when Kamala Harris lost, then Joe Biden, um, Marty, America, the land of low information voters, then the little think they know is mostly lies. You're so right, Joe. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. And as I said, Marty, I think we've spoken about this before, is that we all know now that the majority of people who voted for Trump were the people who were low information voters. We know that for a fact. It's not a guess, it's a fact. And the people who were paying attention to politics the most voted for Kamala. And so how do you get around that? Because as more time goes by, what we're realizing is less and less people are paying attention. So if less and less people are going to be paying attention in the future, less so than now, then that's a problem for Democrats, because Democrats generally get high information voters and Republicans generally get low information voters, especially, and that has increased with MAGA, right? And even if Trump leaves, it's going to be another MAGA person, right? So the Democrats have to get around this, you know, low information voters. And the low information voters, the only way you can get to them, it's not through CNN, it's not through MSNBC, it's on podcasts, it's on TikTok where you go directly to the person, you don't, another person. So that's the only way you can get. We need eyeballs. I mean, here's the good thing. Money is not as important as it used to be, right? In the old, I'm not saying money doesn't matter. Of course it does. But look at people like Bloomberg, right? Like who ran, right? He had $2 million. He had millions of dollars. He got these rich people, right? But they never get more than 2%. Why? Because they don't have charisma, right? They don't know how to talk to people, right? So surely slashing Medicare and spiking costs is going to affect. I do. I do agree with that, Nick. And that's the thing. Like, I think the thing about it, Nick, is that Crespo, that's a good name. The thing about it is, at the midterm elections, is that basically, I think a lot of people should know better. We saw how we handled the COVID pandemic, how it wrecked the economy, tax cut. Yeah, they should know better. But unfortunately, a lot of people just don't pay attention to politics, and people have short term memory as well. And there's too many people out there who think everyone is as bad as each other. Hi, Kimmy. They're just as bad. Liberal, they're bad. They're bad. Yeah. And Joe, we have 2 or 3 Democrats out here talking. That's it. Asking them to be ready for primary. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's not enough. There's not enough. It's not clear who's going to be running. Hi, Kimmy. How you going? Anyway, it's not clear who's going to be the front runner for the Democrats. And I personally can't there's no like a Barack Obama at the moment where you can go, that's the person, right? There's people like, for me, Marnie, it still kills me when people say both sides are awful. And I'm quick to say, well, if you consider one wants to keep a constitutional republic and one, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's perfect, Marnie. Yeah. But again, Marnie, the problem is that most of them probably don't even know what the Constitution is. I probably, as an Australian, know more about the Constitution than probably most of MAGA do. And they only care about the Constitution when it applies to them. For example, like the Second Amendment. Otherwise, when Trump says about, tearing the Constitution up, they seem to just go along with it. So I think a lot of people don't, they just say things like the Constitution and things like that, but I don't know how much they actually affects them. I think at the end of the day, in 2024, saying that Trump was a fascist or an authoritarian didn't work. Although I will say, he's probably been a lot worse this time than he was last time, right? Because the first time between 2016 2020, he was kind of constrained a little bit by establishment Republicans around him. So there was a lot of we have to represent ourselves because Democrats are not representing. There's a lot of people around him in 2016 who were like who stood up to him. Like when he tried to get the when he tried to get people to when he lost the election and he tried to get the governor to change to get him more votes, but he stood up to him. Right. So people stood up to him back then. Right. Mike Pence stood up to him. Mike Pence said, no, I'm still going to certify the election. But a lot of those people are no longer there. He's been now replaced by yes people, right? And the people who did stand up to him, like the Marco Rubios and people like that, they've completely like caved to him now. They're like so he doesn't have the guardrails that he used to. So I do think the authoritarian thing would work better now than it would in 2024, because I think obviously the trying to overthrow the election was a massive thing, but during his first term, it was more of a normal term than what we're seeing at the moment, right? So the big thing they had against him was the election, right? But besides that, it wasn't as bad as what we're seeing at the moment. The Donald Trump we're seeing now is Donald Trump being unleashed, right? It's Donald Trump on steroids. Everything he probably wanted to do in the first term, he's now doing now. And he probably knows he's going to lose the midterms. So he has to do it all now before the midterms, because by the time it gets to the midterms, he's probably going to lose his majority. And then he's not going to be able to do anything. So he's going to be basically a lame duck president. So he's trying to rush everything at the moment. So that's a big problem. I think that, America's kind of running out of time trying to constrain him. He's like basically getting rid of, the statistician because, she gave him a slightly bad job report. And that's the other thing, like how bad Trump is this term, right? Is that the statistician that he fired, right, which is insane. Hi, Paolo. Nice to see you. Hi, Diane. Nice to see you. Basically, the unemployment rate went from 4.1 to 4.2, right? That is insane, right? Like it's not a huge amount, right? So it wasn't a good jobs report at all. But what makes it worse is that he reacted to a jobs report that wasn't great, but it wasn't like catastrophic, right? It wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It just ticked up slightly, right? And that was enough for him, right, to fire the statistician, plus the Supreme Court giving him immunity. Yeah. And I think that just says to me so much, because had it gone to like unemployment rate of 5.1, right, then I could have sort of seen why he went crazy, right? Yeah, not that, he still shouldn't, but the fact that he did it when it just slightly went up just says to me he's not going to take even the slightest bit of pushback, right? Not even the slightest bit of pushback. And so, but I think that really exposed Trump. We have a good people that can be worthy of the presidency, like Governor Pritzker, Bashir, Pete Buttigieg. Forgive me if I botch their names. Yeah, personally, I like Pete Buttigieg. I think Pete Buttigieg is my favorite. My only thing with Pete Buttigieg is that obviously, because he's gay, is he gonna win the mid states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all those sort of places? Ben Shapiro or Josh Shapiro? I think you mean Josh Shapiro. Ben Shapiro probably wouldn't do that great in the Democratic Party, Linda. Yeah, but Josh Shapiro, he's a good talker. Yeah, he's a good talker though, Linda. That's true. Insane is the word. Yeah, I mean, but I think a lot of this stuff, like who's so I'm hoping someone sort of comes up, during the election. We have good people that can run against him. Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing is, I don't think Trump is going to run at the next election. But I think a couple of reasons. One is it's going to be really hard constitution-wise, but we know he doesn't care about that. But secondly, he's not in the best health, right? And so in 4 years' time, he's going to be into his 80s. I don't even actually think he would want to run again because of his health, right? So, but I do think what he'll do is he'll pick someone who's basically like a loyalist, and he will basically run as like a de facto. That it will still be the MAGA party, right? That will run as like a MAGA person. The only other person I could see that would run as an outsider to Trump is maybe Tucker Carlson, who's kind of at the moment going against him on a few things, and he's very popular. Democrats like me, we cannot sit and wait for the good night on the white horse. Nobody's come to save our butts. That's what I'm saying. Epstein knew everything about whoever. Do record now and get them out of here. Matt, hi Matt, thanks for joining. Yeah, I mean, do recalls. Yeah, I just think that basically, what I'd like to see is the Democrats pick someone who's a good talker, who can go on different platforms and talk. I think Kamala Harris. Sorry, yes, Josh. Yeah, yeah, and Kamala Harris wasn't really given a proper chance. To be honest with you, I felt that the advisors and the people around her didn't do her a very good service by hiding her. Basically, you know, you went from Joe Biden, who wasn't great at communicating, right? And then basically the advisors told Kamala to not go on too many shows. They were trying to hide her. And then the Republicans were painting her as being not good at communicating, the same as Joe Biden. And they basically helped the Republicans by not letting her go on all the shows. Gay into black children, I love Pete, but I don't think America's ready. Yeah, Christina, unfortunately I do agree with you. I'm just worried that we actually won't have fair elections since it's controllable. Well, Marnie, it's interesting that you said that because one of my biggest things that I've been looking at recently is like the gerrymandering that's been going on in like places like Texas, and it's a real concern. It is a real concern. I can't believe that in your country that you can write basically the district, redo the districts, right? Um, Even if the population is more Democrat or more, it's insane that this whole gerrymandering thing is actually a real thing. When I first heard about it years ago, I just thought there must be more to it, all that sort of stuff. But I realize now that it's really, I know the original how it started, the War of Independence, because they didn't want the Federalists to basically get voted in, so they did this gerrymandering thing. So I understand the history, but that was like back then. I think they should get rid of it. I think I think yeah, I think basically they should get rid of gerrymandering. I think the Democrats today actually did say that they would get rid of it, but of course the Republicans won't do it. I do know that Democrats also do it as well. Gretchen Whitmore, yeah, that's a good one as well. Gretchen Whitmore, I like her as well. Yeah, um, but yeah, I just think I think someone like Pete Buttigieg, but maybe you know not gay. So, but if anybody, I've got to say, uh, I do remember a lot of people said Barack Obama wouldn't get elected because he's black, right? And and I was like, and when I heard that, I thought, oh, maybe that's true. But he got voted in twice. So I don't know. I think in America, I'm just guessing, but I feel it'd be easier for a black person to get voted in than it would be for a gay person, just because how it is culturally in America at the moment, especially with all the anti-woke stuff that you see so much. Um, because Barack Obama brought out a lot of people who don't usually vote to vote, and that included a lot of the black population who came out and voted in big numbers. I- you know, Pete Buttigieg isn't going to be able to bring out anyone new, really, that wouldn't have been picked up by the Democrats anyway. So I think that's agree on Harris. They should fire all Democratic consultants. Yeah, they did her a disservice. And the thing is, when she debated um, Trump, she won that debate. And I'm saying that as a nonpartisan thing. She won that debate, right? Biden lost the debate. He didn't lose the debate because of Trump. He lost the debate because, yeah, Democrats are really good at helping Republicans. They even voted with them on the bill this year, voted against the party. Yeah, get rid of that electoral college. Yeah, I, I, I have to go, but I'm super happy that I got to see you this morning, start off my day. Thanks, Kimmy. Nice to see you. Yeah, yeah. But not a woman. So not a woman. Okay. All right. Yeah, oh, look, I think a woman could win. I actually do think a woman could win in America, because I don't feel I feel like a woman, um, is not something. I mean, Kamala Harris got painted as DEI because Joe Biden basically said, um, "I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna have a vice president who's black, right, and a woman." I don't think you should have said that. Like, in my opinion, I don't think you should have said that. I think you should have just said, "I'm gonna pick the best vice president in the world, and that happens to be Kamala Harris." We need to be careful with our wording, um, how we say things. We shouldn't say we're going to pick someone because they're this, they're black, whatever, because you're giving the other side, right, ammunition to go DEI. Right? So we need to start saying we're picking the best people, and if that happens to be a black person, that happens to be a black person. But we shouldn't be saying, you know, beforehand, because then they're saying, because basically you're telling the American people is that that person is only getting that there might have been someone better, but it wasn't a black woman. That is a really bad messaging by Democrats. And yeah, thanks. But and so and I think from what I heard, I don't think Kamala liked it when he said that. I actually think I remember thinking, and I wouldn't have liked that. If I was a black woman and someone said that to me, I would I wouldn't have liked that. I would have been like, no, no, you mean I'm the best person? You mean I'm the best person for the job, not just the best black woman person, right? So again, I think the thing with Joe Biden, he was kind of like nice guy, right? Really nice guy, but a little bit old school. So, wasn't really thinking about how this could get portrayed. Yeah. So I think the messaging has to be better. It can't be about where this is a person coming, where it can't be identity politics. You know, you can do identity politics without saying identity politics, right? See Democrats helping Republicans again. Yeah. Um, and and you know, we just pick whoever we think is the best person, right? As long as you allow, as long as the people who are running can be diverse, that's the important thing. As long as we have a diverse amount of people that is running, right? Then whoever makes it, well, then that's what it is, right? So we can't just have 100% white men running. That's obviously not a good thing. He did the same thing with Supreme Court. Yeah, you're right, Paula. He did exactly the same thing with Supreme Court. And then whoever he got for this, yeah, yeah, that's right. It's just when I hear that stuff, I just think, when I heard Joe say that, I just went, "Oh, Joe." And I'm sure he didn't do it on purpose. I'm sure he wasn't saying it as a bad thing, right? He probably thought he was saying a good thing, right? But it's like when your grandfather says something, you're like, "Oh, no, Joe, please don't." so, so, you know, I think communicating is a really important thing this day and age. You don't want to give them, you don't want to give the opposition any points that they don't, we don't want to have self-inflicted wounds, right? But anyone who knows Biden knows he sometimes tries to say the right thing, but yeah, I agree, Linda. 100%, Linda. I don't think he did it on purpose. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he didn't think about it. He thought he was doing the right thing, but he's also an older guy, right? So he doesn't, this is all new to him, right? So I totally get it. Yeah, yeah. I just think it didn't. I think just objectively, it wasn't a good thing for Kamala. Yeah, because she got painted as the DEI candidate after that, right? And then if you said no, 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 she's a this and that, and they go, well, that's what Joe said. Joe said and it was like, oh God. So no self-inflicted wounds would be good this time. Just pick someone. Don't say you're picking them on their race or their gender. Just you're picking someone because we think that's the best person, right? No matter what their race is. The interesting thing was in 2024 election, um, was that Trump and MAGA tried to paint Kamala Harris as the woke candidate. Like they were very woke for all this stuff, even though they actually very rarely um, talked about politics, talked about work stuff. In fact, they ran away from it. In fact, Democrats wanted to run away from work so much they ended up in the hands of Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, like, which, by the way, I also think was a bad thing, right? Like, okay, you can accept if someone endorses you, like Liz Cheney, oh, thank you, Liz, for the endorsement. But running around with Liz and her father, Dick, even a little bit, I think was a bad move. And I think it was a bad move because it made Kamala be the establishment candidate again. This is the establishment candidate, right? And Trump is now the outsider again, right? And he always wins as the outsider. And he wanted to be the outsider the whole time. And when Kamala Harris started going to all these events, like it wasn't like, remember, it wasn't just like one event. They did this whole circuit together, right? And then Dick Cheney was getting involved, and it's like the guy who invaded Iraq. Like, I mean, what's going on here? Like, like if you can't win, just like you're not going to win the young people doing that, right? You're not going to win, the progressives doing that. And you're going to make yourself out to be the establishment candidate. And what we saw with Trump, who's a fake populist, but he's a populist, but he's a fake populist, and a real populist like Mandami, right? They run as the outsiders, right? I miss normal. Yeah, yeah. This is exactly right and unbelievable. Yeah. He was the outsider. Yeah, he was. He was the outsider to, like, he's in reality, spot on. Most Americans are so tired of establishment. Yeah. The reality is Trump is not the outsider. Trump is the establishment. He just wants his own establishment. He wants to get rid of the establishment that holds him back, right? And replace it with an establishment that doesn't have any guardrails, right? I agree about running with Liz Cheney. Not a good look. Yeah. They don't want guard. Trump didn't want guardrails around him, and some of the establishment people, right? They're not all awful. Some of them do have some principles about elections being stolen, you know, certifying the election of all that sort of stuff. They might be okay with invading Iraq, but we still got to have a peaceful transfer of power. So they have kind of like this, different views on different things. But I thought when I saw Kamala with Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, I just thought I was missing something, right? I thought, okay, she's around all these really smart people, right? They've got a lot of money. They're smart people. I must be missing something. But for me, when I was watching it, I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. But I'm sure, I'm sure they know better, right? After she lost, I was like, maybe they weren't right, right? Maybe maybe hanging out with Liz Cheney all the time wasn't the best move. Again, you can take Mandami was running a campaign that worked on a smaller arena just in town. Can you do that nationally? Yeah. See, Diane, I think some Democrats on progressives, I think on the right, on the moderates, they like really going after Mandami, right? And on the progressive left, to the left, they're getting overexcited about what Mandami could do nationally. I think there is a nuanced conversation to have about Mandami, about what he could do in a national election, right? Because Mandami, as Diane just said, was running a campaign in New York for New Yorkers, right? About New York issues, right? And that might not translate well in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. It could, because what Mandami also did was talk about cost of living. Yeah, because that wasn't a good. Yeah, but he did do the cost of living thing really good, and that cost of living thing would work really well, right? In the swing states. So I could see parts of it that could work, and other parts that I don't think would work as well, because he's also there's not a better candidate than Mandami. Yeah, look, I think them. Look, I don't know. Nationally, this is the thing, right? Nationally, is who is gonna, who's gonna be. I mean, in America, you have the electoral college vote, right? And the electoral college vote is a big problem because you can't just you have to pander to these states that, you know it's, to me, insane because we don't have the electoral college vote in Australia, right? And so it just seems crazy to me. I understand on some principle that you want to give, you want to have people in Pennsylvania, smaller states, have a say, right? But at the end of the day, if if having the minute Kamala in one of her speeches proudly proclaimed that US is the greatest nation in the world, I thought, oh, this isn't good. It's called gaslighting. America, yeah, yeah, true, true, yeah. I don't agree with everything that Madani is saying, but he's authentic. Yeah, and Linda, spot on. Authenticity is what wins elections these days, right? Because when people see Trump, right, even if you don't like him, they think he's authentic. Yeah, so I agree, man. You have to be authentic. This is what I mean. Like, Democrats can take stuff from Mandami and maybe give it to a candidate, or not just don't give it to a candidate, but because it has to be authentic. You can't just pretend it's a candidate. You can't just make a candidate become that. But find a candidate who maybe appeals a bit more to the mid states, and see how that goes. But yeah, I'm not saying for sure Mandami would lose in a big election, but I've got Democrats want the best candidate, but need to think best candidate likely to win. Yeah, I agree, Paolo. Yeah, and I just don't know. Like, see, with Pete Buttigieg, I think okay, I think the gay thing is definitely going to be a problem, and with Mandami, um, he's a Muslim. I I think that's going to be a problem. I think, I think he'll get tainted as a communist. I think that will be a problem. And he, he has said enough things in the past that they can just run ads 24/7. Like, he's quoted Marx, right? I agree, Linda. Yeah, he's quoted Marx before, which again, he was like 23, 24 when he did it. It's not a big deal, but the problem is that Republicans and MAGA are very good at running negative ads. We saw that with Kamala Harris, right? We saw that where they ran this ad about the trans people. They said, they are for them, we are for you. That was an effective ad because basically what they basically said, and what they did is, in that ad, they showed Kamala Harris talking about letting people in prison, trans people in prison, have reassignment surgery, right? I think she said it like 4 years earlier once, and it actually never happened, right? But that was enough for them to run the ad 24/7, right? And so we have to be careful that, because MAGA is just, and here's the other thing about the 2024 election, right? Is that particular ad was more effective because the Democrats and Kamala refused to actually acknowledge the ad actually existed. They ignored it, and ignoring it made it worse, right? You can't ignore an ad that was getting that much play. What they should have done is confronted that ad, right? And they should have said, because it's actually true, is they should have said the people obsessed with woke is MAGA, right? Because all MAGA do is run ads about trans people and all this stuff. We're talking about cost of living. We're talking about housing. We're talking about this, right? So again, the Democrats should have confronted the Republicans on their negative ads, on ads about trans people, and I think it would have been more effective, because if you don't actually acknowledge, right, being attacked in this sort of, because it was being effective, you could tell it was effective, right? You don't have to acknowledge everything, right? But you have to acknowledge it when something's breaking through, and this particular ad was. Then you have to fight back. Otherwise, by staying silent, silence might be to, I'm not talking to a large part of America, it might be more that the Republicans must be correct because Kamala isn't fighting back against this, right? So it was a mistake not to fight back against that ad. It was a mistake for Kamala to to have her advisors basically treat her, be so conservative about where she goes. I mean, this is the fascinating thing. She had a debate with Trump and she kicked his ass. She absolutely dog walked him through that debate, right? Remember, she got him angry about crowd size. She manipulated him about crowd size or something like that. It was hilarious to watch. People wanted a real solution. Yeah, it's true, Linda. But there are cultural things. I think, at the end of the day, cost of living is going to be the number one thing, right? But but the interesting thing was, in 2024 election, is that the Democrats were not running on woke. They were not talking about woke culture, but they still got defined as that. And Republicans were talking about woke all the time, right? But they still came across as the party who was more interested in people's economic lives, right? So how the hell did that happen? You have the Democrats who didn't run on woke, and you have the Republicans who ran on just discussing woke and trans people all the time. Yet they were the party of the working class, And the other party who ran away from it, right? They got tagged as the woke party because they were basically what MAGA did is they included the whole anti-woke thing, right? They made the Democrats part of the woke culture or the woke whatever it was, right? That was happening. And they got defined as that. So it didn't matter what they say or what they did, they couldn't get rid of that, right? And so they needed to confront it. And they needed to turn it around and they needed to make it about Trump. Trump, what we're not the ones spending $120 million talking about trans issues. You guys are. You're spending $120 million running ads about trans people. And then you say this, we're going to spend ads talking about cost of living, housing prices and stuff like that, but they never did that. They talked a little bit about housing and stuff like that. I think I think I can understand it as well because they thought that calling Trump an authoritarian and calling Trump a fascist to some degree was going to work. But I think they didn't realize, and it was hard to know because you don't really know until afterwards, is that so many people were not paying attention, right? And more people were interested in cost of living than they were in whether Trump is a fascist or not. And also, Trump hadn't done a lot of the things that he's done now. So they don't have that hindsight. They probably thought Trump was not going to be as bad as people were making him out to be because in his first term, he was bad, but he wasn't as bad as what people thought. Yes, but look at what's happening now. People are losing their jobs. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I don't. Trump is great running as the opposition, right, leader, but he's hopeless as running as the incumbent. And we saw that in 2020, in 2016, 2020, right? Soon as COVID happened, his ratings went down because he couldn't handle it. He doesn't know how to manage. He doesn't know how to govern. And people saw that, so they voted him out, right? But because of post-COVID inflation, that got blamed. Biden got the blame for that. And Democrats got the blame. And Americans had short-term memory. And so they basically voted for him, again. So it's like the cycle just keeps going on. But I think, I don't think, Trump now you can't run as the outsider when you're the president, right? So will get the blame for Medicare cuts. He will get the blame for, and if you look at his polling, right, he's not losing his base. We had the best economy under Biden. Yeah. Linda, this is the amazing thing, right? And I say this as an Australian, where inflation affected every single country in the Western world. And the country to get it down the fastest or to stop it from going higher was America by a long shot, right? Our inflation was way worse than yours. Europe's inflation was way worse. Scandinavia, all the others. So Joe Biden brought inflation down, right, better than any other Western country. And yet in America, it was painted as he was like the worst thing. The cuts won't happen till months up a bit. Yeah. Yeah, but I think you can still run on those cuts being done. So I think it'll still work against him. But yeah, like I think, but it's also a hard story to tell, Linda, because if you're a person or a family who's being affected by inflation, because inflation is accumulative, it doesn't generally go down. It might not go up as fast. You know what I mean? But it's still more than it was 3 or 4 years earlier, right? Yeah, but the problem is it's a hard story to tell because if you tell people we're doing really good and they're not and they're struggling, they take that as you don't understand what's going on with my life. And you are now painted as the establishment who's out of touch with the average person, right? So they couldn't tell that story. It was a hard story to tell because inflation was still up from when they came in. It's just that it stopped going up as much. So it would have just made the Democrats look worse. I think what the good thing for Joe Biden is in 10, 20 years' time, when they talk about this in 10 or 20 years' time, when people are less, crazy about it, the history books will show Joe Biden did very well to bring inflation down and to do it. Now, remember, like the other thing with his decline, right? I mean, the hero of the Republican Party is Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan had Alzheimer's in his second term. And he's the hero. So I think all this stuff about Joe Biden I think 10 or 20 years' time, people are going to see Joe Biden as a really good president, right? And all this stuff about, the auto pen that Trump does, I think that's all going to fade into the background, right? And the history books will show that he brought down inflation really well. And, and there might be some criticism that he should have like left early, whatever. But I think that's going to be minor stuff. I think, you know, I think generally he did pretty good. He wasn't like perfect or anything, but no president is. If you agree 100% with the person you're voting for, then it's probably a cult. Like, I mean, no one's going to agree 100% with the person. More people were able to get health insurance coverage, more manufacturing jobs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I bet Linda, a lot of those people, right, who got all those things, I bet you a lot of them didn't even realize where it came from. They just got it, and they just, I've got more health insurance. They probably had no idea it was Joe Biden. You know, when Joe Biden sent out $1,000 checks to people during COVID, um, he never put his name on the checks. When Donald Trump sent out $1,000 checks to everyone in America, he put his name on it. It said a check from Donald Trump or something like that. So again, he wasn't perfect, but compared to was affected as the president, yeah. But compared, he was affected. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Donald Trump let let everybody know, right, that when he was giving people $1,000 checks, that it was coming from him, right? And I remember Joe Biden saying, "I should have done the same thing," and I think he should have. It's a shame that you have to do that, like that that you have to put your name on checks and stuff, because but but if the other person's doing it like Trump, then I think it's good for the Democrats to do as well, so they get credit for it. They need to talk about the things that they do well, right? I don't think a lot of Americans would have understood about the infrastructure thing or the Inflation Reduction Act, all that stuff, all the stuff that they did. I don't think they talked enough about it, right? Trump just talks about stuff that he does. Trump could like give someone 5 cents tomorrow, and he'd talk about it for the next 20 years, right? I still can't believe stupid people enough to believe Trump personally gave them the money. Yeah, I know. But just by putting his name on it, you know, it was like, you know, uh, and again, Biden didn't do it because it's such a cringe thing to do. It's like, oh, why would I put but he did say in the end, maybe that's what I should have done. Agree, they do need to talk about the good bits. Yeah. Most people, like when I go on Twitter, and I don't know what representative of a MAGA is Twitter, most of them, when I debate them on Twitter, they don't know anything about what the Democrats did. They have no idea about any of it, right? So it just goes to show that they're not messaging very well, right? And obviously it doesn't help when you have someone like Joe Biden who wasn't a good communicator towards the end, right? And at the end of the day, you have to be, if you're going to be a president, you have to be a good communicator. It's like one of the number one jobs. So yeah, but yeah, that's the thing. Like I just think the whole thing was, yeah, it could have been handled better, but yeah. Anyway, because he's the narcissist. Yeah, he is. He's a full on narcissist. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is I hope that the Democrats don't try and replicate him. I hope they don't think, well, you know, he did, Trump won twice, so maybe we need to become more like Trump. I really hope they don't do that, right? Because you can you can be popular and you can get eyeballs like Mandami. Like, look at what Mandami does, right? He got eyeballs, right? He didn't have as much money, right, or as some of the other people, but he was very good at getting attention, right? And he didn't, and Mandami wasn't going around saying, they're going to eat the dogs, they're going to eat the cats. He wasn't saying inflammatory things like that, and he still got attention. So Mandami proved that you don't have to be a complete arsehole, right, to get attention on the media, right, all the time, and you can get attention from people, and without doing those awful things that Trump does, right, because someone like Chuck Schumer is never going to be able to get like the type of attention that you need these days, right? Like Chuck Schumer on TikTok, well, it's just not going to work. Like you need someone who's got charisma, who's and look, in some ways, it's a bit of a shame that it's come down to like these sort of things, like I would say like a little bit sort of shallow. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit shallow because social media is kind of shallow. You know what I mean? But it is important that you know how to message people. And look, I'm sure there's a lot of these politicians who are like, "Why do I have to go on TikTok? I'm gonna have to, like, do some stupid dance or to get someone to," you know, I get that, a lot of them are probably thinking, especially the older ones, they're like, "This is not me," and but unfortunately, it's just the reality of the new landscape that we live in, and you can't pretend like it wasn't. I think in 2024, Democrats ran like they did 4 and 8 years ago before then, and the MAGA people ran like a modern campaign that was based on going on TikTok, podcasts, all that sort of stuff. They ran a better information campaign that the Democrats did. Democrat Kamala was just on CNN all the time, MSNBC, and all that stuff, which is fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but she didn't get enough eyeballs, and because of that, she got. Here's the other thing: if Kamala went on all these podcasts and everything, right? She couldn't have got defined the way she was, right? Because the reason she got defined as she does word salad, she can't communicate properly, is because her advisors were not letting her talk enough, right? And so what happens then is the MAGA people, they fill in that gap with or how come she doesn't go on this show? Has she done everything? That would have killed that story. It's like, what are you talking about? She was on Joe Rogan, then she was on this guy, then she was on this. That story would have been, it's an easy story to kill, right? And they could have easily won that story, but unfortunately, yeah, that's what they did. I still think it was always going to be a hard thing to do because of the inflation and all that stuff. But I don't know. Anyway, did you guys? I think I better go because it's like 10:05 here. Is there anything you guys want to talk about at all before I go? Any questions or anything like that? Did you want to talk about Sydney Sweeney at all, or no, no, no Sydney Sweeney? Yeah, I did find it sort of yeah, interesting. The whole yeah. Biden, I'll never understand why you'd elect a president your children shouldn't be allowed to watch. Yeah, that's right, Marty. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, uh, the whole Trump thing is just, to me, a little bit um, like you wouldn't want to be friends with Trump. I don't think most people would want to be friends with Trump. Trump wouldn't want to hang out with his own base. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine Trump hanging out with his base? Like, he would never want to hang out with his own base, right? Um, so yeah, I don't. I've never understood the Trump attraction, but it's just the way it is. I think maybe entertainment, and reality TV in America is a bigger thing. But yeah, I just think that's you just have a different culture to us here. In Australia, we're a little bit more sort of. I mean, I guess someone like that would find it hard to win in Australia. I think that's a good thing in a way. But yeah, but who knows? Like, hopefully, um, you know, the midterms work out well for the Democrats, and then they win the election. I know anything could happen between now and then because Trump is definitely trying to stop things from happening, elections, all that sort of stuff. So who knows what's going to happen between then? From all I can say, the Trump administration said it would reinstall a Confederate statue that was toppled and set on Black Lives Matter protests. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just, yeah, it's all crazy stuff. But anyway, I've got to go. Thank you so much for listening to me today. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to me. I'll do another one soon. I've enjoyed it so much. To you guys, thank you for the love hearts. Thank you so much. Thanks, Marnie. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, everybody. I love it. I've got to say, one of the funnest things I love it is when people comment and stuff. So it's more interactive. I do love it when we do that. Um, yeah, so it always makes it more fun and interesting. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. See ya.